Hi, my name is Kyla Bauer. I spent 5 years in a PhD program trying to understand what is causing adult loneliness, and I just successfully defended my research, and I'm going to share the final results with you. There are a lot of adults who are trying to understand their own loneliness, and there are governments, nonprofits, and businesses who are making a really good faith effort to address loneliness in their communities. So I wanted to do research that really helped people make sense of how loneliness epidemics can occur and the solutions that already exist to help with it. So I'm publicly sharing my defense presentation with you. It can get a little sciencey, but do not get scared off from that. Everything I share with you gets broken down into simple terms. This has officially gone through the community test. So like the official title of my presentation, maybe it looks a little overwhelming to you now, but then I'm going to have a slide where I make it easier to understand. This way you can get a sense of the rigor of my work and then how to easily connect with it. I use pictures as a key part of my talk, so it's really helpful if you can see the pictures. I'm still working on publications, and I'll only be sharing information as it gets published. This is part of the peer review process of science. Fortunately, I have a lot of information to share with you already. So I'm not going to publicly talk about my PhD committee and others who help with my research, but in order to do my research, I had to work with 5 faculty at my university, and there were an additional 3 people who helped out with my research projects. They were all amazing, of course, and they help me know when my ideas are bad or if they're going somewhere. They also voice ethical concerns to make sure that my research lives up to our mission in public health, that our work is being used to help people improve their overall well-being. So to tell you about myself and my motivations, in my career, I have worked directly with community members and stakeholders on population health issues that we have really struggled to make a dent in for many decades since they were first recognized. Issues like climate change, the obesity epidemic, the cost of healthcare. And when I started my PhD program, it was actually right at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was strange to me that during this global tragedy, I actually began to feel a little bit hopeful. And that's because despite all the controversies and disagreements around how the pandemic was handled, the COVID-19 response was the fastest, largest, and most effective public health response that I have witnessed in my professional career. And it made me think about how our work in public health may be well designed to address a virus that isn't always translating to other kinds of population health issues. So when a loneliness epidemic in the US was declared, I thought it was a good opportunity to think about how do we approach it differently since we know it is not a virus. I consulted with more than 20 experts to get different perspectives to inform my research. So let's start with what's typically understood about loneliness. Loneliness is this signal in our bodies that our need for social connection, meaning human relationships, is not being met. It indicates that the quality of our relationships is different than what we need. So even if we are not objectively isolated from other people, we can still feel like we are alone. It's often measured using this validated survey called the UCLA Loneliness Scale. And this captures an overall sense of how much an individual feels they are valued and are part of something larger than themselves. Loneliness is a normal part of human life, but at high and chronic levels, it has a greater impact on mortality risk than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Chronic loneliness can turn into this vicious cycle with severe depression that over a long time can actually lead to objective social isolation. So people experiencing chronic loneliness describe it as becoming trapped to the point that it shatters their own sense of self, and there tends to be a lot of shame around it. In population studies done across several countries, younger adult age groups are actually experiencing serious loneliness at higher levels than older age groups. But across the board in the US, roughly 20 to 40% of all adults seem to be suffering from it. The US Surgeon General recently established a loneliness epidemic and outlined a national strategy to improve social connection in our communities. However, this strategy acknowledges that there are no interventions that are known to be meaningfully effective. So, therapy has been found to have a small impact, but not enough to eliminate severe chronic loneliness. There is also a difficulty in evaluating community interventions that we do because they are usually these really unique programs for very small groups of people. So, my dissertation is a simple question about digging deeper into the underlying causes of loneliness that can better inform how we intervene. When we say that loneliness is a problem with the quality of social connection, what qualities are we talking about? How is it possible that these qualities could be pervasive across our entire country? The biggest challenge to my research was this new idea that social connection is now a human basic need in the same way that we think of food or water. But there is no existing information in public health to explain what do we mean by that and how does this change how we're going to intervene on loneliness. So I did what's called an interdisciplinary literature review to find out what do oxygen, water, food, and shelter have in common with social connection that makes them our most critical needs for survival. This is the detailed version I created to show what I found, but I'm going to talk through a simpler version. So we can think of water as both the ocean and a glass of water. Social connection can also be understood in these different ways. Social connection as an ocean is everything contained within human society. Violence in relationships, wars, abuse, crimes, safety, justice. Labor, how we divide our labor, what we trade in relationships, how we socially organize and how we live together. All of it, the whole thing is social connection. Social connection for you as an individual is a glass of water, and every glass of water that you have drank in your entire lifetime. Is that water safe? Is there enough of it? What else is in that water that helps you to be healthy? Social connection is about the overall safety, the amount, and the quality of interactions that you have had with other people across your entire life. When evolutionary biologists talk about our dependence on social connection to survive as human beings, they are not only talking about our family and friends. They are talking about our dependence on the societies in which we live that is critical to our survival as a social species. A society is made up of cooperative and interdependent interactions among groups of people who live together. It can be defined by geographical boundaries, like the outer boundary of a city or a town, or communication boundaries. Who do you talk to on the phone or online? It can also be defined by the larger social processes that adhere us to living together, like our shared values, our shared beliefs. In public health, we talk about living in a society within what's called the social ecological model. By organizing our social environment, it's actually easier to understand what a society is made up of. Relational means our close relationships, like our family and friends. Community means community spaces or organizations where a lot of social interactions are taking place. Think of school, work, or social clubs. Societal are the abstract things that tie us together, like our social norms, our values. And these abstract things influence how we interact with each other in a society. Why do health researchers think that an entire society can directly impact our health? The most up-to-date theory about this comes from environmental health and social epidemiology, and it's called the social exposome model. This model suggests that individuals can be physically exposed to things happening in a society through direct social interactions with the people they live around or communicate with. Direct social interactions are the actors or people who are involved, the places where social interactions are happening, and their dynamics. What was that interaction like for you? Physical exposure to direct social interactions is believed to be how individuals experience dependence on the societies in which they live. How does physical exposure to direct social interactions get inside of our bodies to impact our health? Social homeostasis is an idea that has been around since 1956, and neuroscientists are still updating how it might work in people. So this is the detailed model, but I'm going to talk about a simpler version. Homeostasis, it's a biology term. It describes all of the processes happening inside our bodies that help maintain balance and stability in order to keep us alive. Our cells need resources, like a certain amount of water, in order to do their jobs. Our brain actually monitors these needs and can send signals like feeling thirsty to encourage us to find and drink some water. This creates a direct biological pathway for how human survival is dependent on a resource that exists outside of our bodies. If there is a severe disruption to this process, it can cause dysfunction in our bodies that directly develops into disease and mortality risk. Our brain, excuse me, our brain and nervous system seem to depend on specific kinds of sensory stimulation in order to function properly. What we see, what we hear, what we touch is experienced in our nervous system and can be stored in our brains. Specific kinds of sensory information, like hearing the sound of people's voices and language, being touched, like having your hand held or being hugged, we get that from our relationships, and it can significantly impact our brain development. Our body experiences stress when we feel lonely, and changes happen in our brain to encourage us to change our behaviors around other people. If there is a severe or chronic disruption to this process, neuroscientists are testing if it causes dysfunction that directly develops into severe mental illness. So I just explained to you in theory a pathway for how problems with social connection can directly cause poor health. When we talk about lonely people having problems with quality in their relationships, using this theory, I am talking about objective and universal qualities that for some reason are not good for the health of our bodies. So what exactly is going on in society when people feel lonely? Health researchers have already identified a very long list of risk factors for loneliness. It's just that it's hard to make sense of them and why collectively they would be bad for human health. What does being single have to do with childhood trauma or not getting enough support? That all of these can result in loneliness. So for my dissertation, I examined these qualities further to see if there's a more cohesive way to think about them. My hypothesis is specifically that there are core aspects of poor quality in social interactions across society that when you combine them together, they can create a social system that devalues adults, driving chronic loneliness. Again, this is just my hypothesis at the beginning of my research. Where did I get this idea from that lonely adults are being devalued? The standard measure we use to identify when an adult is severely or chronically lonely, it already tells us what lonely adults are finding in their social environments. Loneliness has been found to be a universal experience across cultures and languages in which adults say that they feel devalued in their communities. So what if they are describing something that's actually happening? So in future videos, I'm going to talk about 3 specific research projects that I completed to help us understand the underlying causes of loneliness. I used specific methods that are able to look at quality in social interactions that result in adult loneliness. I'm able to use theory to drive my research so that results are not just describing what might be possible. The results are just going to better explain what we already know in the science community and how loneliness fits into all of this. This way, we can get more concrete guidance for how to understand and address loneliness in our communities. By doing this research, it can help identify the populations who are most at risk for severe loneliness within specific communities. It can also improve guidance in public health to address something as abstract and personal as the quality of our relationships. So that's the first part of my talk. With many research grants and federal agencies currently being shut down, it's really hard to know how long I'll be able to continue this work. So right now I'm giving community talks to help spread this information more if you want to make a request. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope this has been helpful.